The afternoon sun painted the Georgia sky in shades of orange and gold. Marcus Thompson drove his black sedan through the quiet suburban streets, his mind peaceful after 2 weeks with family. He had just left his mother's house where they shared lunch and stories. In 3 days he would return to Fort Benning, back to his duties and responsibilities. But for now he was just a son who had visited his aging mother. Marcus wore simple clothes: blue jeans, a plain gray polo shirt, and comfortable sneakers. Nothing fancy, nothing that drew attention. He had learned long ago that sometimes it was better to blend in, to be invisible. Even after 24 years of service to his country, even with all his achievements and medals, Marcus knew the world often saw only his skin color first. The neighborhood was beautiful. Large trees lined both sides of the road. Well-kept houses sat behind green lawns. Children played in front yards while parents watched from porches. It was the kind of place that appeared in magazines. The kind of place that promised safety and the American dream. Marcus had fought for places like this, had bled for the freedom people enjoyed in neighborhoods like this. He approached a 4-way stop sign and slowed his vehicle. He checked left, then right, then left again. No cars were coming. He proceeded through the intersection, his speed careful and controlled. Marcus was always careful. He had to be. 2 blocks later, red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had done nothing wrong. He knew he had done nothing wrong. But that familiar feeling crept up his spine anyway, the one that had lived there since he was a teenager. The feeling that said danger was near, that said be careful, that said one wrong move could change everything. He pulled over smoothly, putting his car in park. He placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. He did not reach for his license. He did not reach for his registration. He did not reach for anything. He waited, hands visible, breathing steady. In the mirror, he watched the officer step out of the patrol car. The officer was white, maybe in his early 40s, with a thick build and a confident walk. He approached the driver's side window with one hand resting near his weapon. Marcus had seen that walk before, that posture that said, "I am in control here." Marcus rolled down his window and kept his hands on the wheel. The officer leaned down, looked inside the car, and his expression changed. Something shifted in his eyes when he saw Marcus's face. The professional mask slipped for just a moment, replaced by something colder. "License and registration," the officer said. His voice was sharp, harder than it needed to be. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied calmly. "My license is in my wallet in my back pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for them slowly." "Is that okay?" The officer stared at him. "Just get them, and keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus moved carefully. He reached for his wallet with his left hand, moving slowly enough that every motion was clear. He pulled out his license and held it up. Then he leaned toward the glove compartment, opened it with deliberate slowness, and retrieved his registration and insurance card. He handed everything through the window. The officer took the documents without saying thank you, without any courtesy at all. He looked at the license, then back at Marcus, then at the license again. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" the officer asked. "No, sir, I do not," Marcus answered truthfully. "You rolled through that stop sign back there. Didn't come to a complete stop." Marcus felt confusion mix with his caution.
He had stopped.
He knew he had stopped. But he also knew that arguing with a police officer on the side of the road rarely ended well for someone who looked like him. "I apologize, sir. I thought I stopped completely, but I may have been mistaken." The officer's eyes narrowed. "You thought you stopped? Or you know you stopped? Which is it?" Marcus measured his words carefully. "I believed I stopped, sir. But if you say I did not, then I accept that. Where are you coming from?" The question came fast, accusatory. "I was visiting my mother, sir. She lives about 6 blocks from here." "What's her address?" Marcus provided the address. The officer wrote nothing down. He just kept staring, kept looking at Marcus like he was trying to solve a puzzle or catch him in a lie. "Step out of the vehicle," the officer ordered. Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but he kept his voice level. "May I ask why, sir?" "I said step out of the vehicle now. There was no point in arguing." Marcus knew that. He had trained hundreds of soldiers in de-escalation, in following orders, in staying calm under pressure. Now he needed to use that training for himself. "Yes, sir. I am opening the door now. I am stepping out slowly." Marcus opened the door and stepped onto the pavement. He was tall, over 6 feet, with a strong build kept fit by years of military training. He stood with his hands visible at his sides, making no sudden movements. Turn around. Face the car. Put your hands on the hood. Marcus did as instructed. The metal was warm under his palms from the afternoon sun. He could feel people starting to watch. A woman walking her dog had stopped. A man washing his car in a nearby driveway had paused. Their attention made the officer seem more aggressive, as if he needed to prove something. "Is this your car?" the officer demanded. "Yes, sir." "You sure about that? How does someone like you afford a car like this?" The question hung in the air, ugly and clear in its meaning. Someone like you. Marcus had heard versions of that phrase his entire life. Someone like you does not belong here. Someone like you must have stolen it. Someone like you should know your place. "I work, sir. I have worked for many years." "Yeah? Where do you work?" "I work for the United States Army, sir." The officer walked around to look at Marcus's face. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Army? What do you do, clean the bathrooms?" Marcus said nothing. His jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. In his mind, he thought of his daughter starting college, his son playing basketball at the high school, his wife waiting at home. He thought of everything he had to lose, so he stayed silent. The officer noticed a parking sticker on the windshield. It was a pass for Fort Benning, the kind given to people who worked on the base. He pointed at it. "Where did you get this? Did you steal this car from some soldier?" "No, sir. This is my car. I am a soldier." The officer's face twisted into something close to a sneer. "Yeah, right. You probably stole this from some actual soldier. You people always have a story. You people." Those two words carried centuries of hate, of assumptions, of prejudice wrapped in a thin package of authority. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, hot and powerful. But he pushed it down. He had to. Anger could get him killed. "Sir, I assure you this is my vehicle. Everything is legal and registered in my name. We will see about that." The officer pulled out his radio. "I need backup at Oak Street and Maple Drive. Driver is being uncooperative." Marcus had been nothing but cooperative. He had followed every instruction. He had answered every question. But the officer was creating a different story, one where Marcus was the threat, where the officer was the hero keeping the neighborhood safe from people like him. As they waited for backup, Marcus noticed more people watching. An older white woman had pulled her car to the side of the road and was now standing on the sidewalk. She held her phone up, pointed at them. She was recording. The officer saw her too. "Ma'am, you need to move along." "This is police business." The woman did not move. "I am on a public street. I have a right to be here." "Ma'am, I will not ask again." "Good," the woman said firmly, "because I am not leaving. I am recording this interaction to make sure everything is done properly." The officer's face reddened. The witness made him angrier, not more careful. Marcus understood why. The recording meant there would be evidence, proof of what really happened here. And what was happening here was not justice. It was something much uglier. Marcus kept his hands on the car and his mouth shut. He looked at the sky, at the beautiful orange sunset. He thought about all the countries he had served in, all the battles he had fought, all the times he had put his life on the line. And here he was, on a peaceful street in his own country, being treated like a criminal for driving while black. Another patrol car pulled up. A female officer stepped out, younger than the first, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She approached, and the first officer briefed her quickly, speaking in low tones. Marcus caught some words: suspicious, uncooperative, possible stolen vehicle, all lies, but lies told by a man with a badge. The female officer looked at Marcus, then at the growing crowd of witnesses, then back at her partner. Something in her expression suggested doubt, but she said nothing. She stood by while the first officer continued his harassment. "I am going to search this vehicle," the officer announced. "If you have anything illegal in there, you better tell me now." "There is nothing illegal in my car, sir. But I do not consent to a search. I do not need your consent. I have probable cause." "What probable cause, sir?" The officer stepped close, too close, invading Marcus's space in a way that was meant to intimidate. "The probable cause is I said so. Now stay right there with your hands on the car and do not move." Marcus watched in the side mirror as the officer opened his car door and began searching. He went through the center console, tossing things onto the seat. He opened the glove compartment again, dumping its contents. He ran his hands under the seat, searching for something, anything that would justify his suspicion. The female officer shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. The older woman kept recording. More neighbors had come out of their houses now, drawn by the commotion. Marcus saw a teenage boy standing on a porch across the street, watching everything with wide eyes. Marcus met the boy's gaze for a moment. He saw his own son in that young face, saw the lesson being taught right now on this street corner. The boy was learning that even doing everything right might not be enough, that even complete cooperation might not save you, that the color of your skin could make you guilty of existing. The officer moved to the trunk and popped it open. Inside was Marcus's military duffel bag, the one he had packed for his return to base. The officer pulled it out roughly and dropped it on the ground. "What is in this bag?" "My military gear, sir. My uniforms and equipment." The officer unzipped it and began pulling things out. A uniform shirt fell onto the pavement. Then pants. Then boots. He tossed each item carelessly, without respect for property or person. Then he found Marcus's military identification card. He picked it up, glanced at it, and tossed it aside like trash. "Anyone can get a fake ID," he muttered. The woman recording gasped. "Officer, that man has done nothing wrong. He has been completely respectful and cooperative." The officer spun around, his face red with anger. "Lady, I told you to leave. If you do not leave right now, I will arrest you for interfering with an investigation." The woman lifted her chin. "Then arrest me. But I am not stopping this recording." Marcus wanted to thank her. This stranger was risking herself for him, standing up when she did not have to, but he kept silent. Speaking might make things worse. So he just stood there, hands on his car, watching his dignity get shredded on the side of the road. The officer turned back to the search, frustrated that he had found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no evidence of anything illegal. Just a man's clothes and a soldier's gear. But instead of admitting his mistake, instead of apologizing and sending Marcus on his way, the officer doubled down. "I am calling for a K9 unit," he announced. "We will see what the dog finds." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. This could take hours. He would miss dinner with his family. His wife would worry. But more than that, this was about humiliation. The officer had found nothing but refused to stop. He was determined to find something, anything, to justify his initial suspicion, to prove that his gut feeling about someone like Marcus had been right all along. The teenage boy was still watching from his porch. Marcus looked at him again and did something small but important. He stood up straighter. He lifted his head higher. Even with his hands on the car, even in this moment of powerlessness, Marcus refused to be broken. He would not give this officer the satisfaction of seeing him defeated. The woman kept recording. The female officer kept watching in uncomfortable silence. The neighbors kept gathering, and Marcus kept breathing, kept staying calm, kept surviving another encounter that should never have happened in the first place. The officer reached for his radio to call for the K9 unit, but before he could speak, Marcus made a decision. He had one phone call he could make, one card he could play. He had not wanted to use it. Using it felt like admitting that justice only worked when you had rank or power. But standing here being treated like a criminal while his gear lay scattered on the ground, Marcus realized sometimes you had to fight back. "Sir," Marcus said quietly. "May I make a phone call?" The officer laughed. "What, you want to call your lawyer?" "Sure, go ahead. See if that helps you." Marcus reached slowly for his phone. He dialed a number from memory and waited. When the person answered, he spoke clearly and calmly. "This is Colonel Marcus Thompson. I need assistance at the corner of Oak and Maple in Riverside. I have been detained during a traffic stop." He paused, listening. "Yes, ma'am. I will wait here." He ended the call and placed his phone back in his pocket. The officer stared at him, confusion crossing his face. "Colonel? You expect me to believe you are a colonel?" Marcus did not answer. He just placed his hands back on the car and waited. The officer shook his head, thinking it was all a bluff, all a desperate attempt to get out of trouble. But Marcus knew better. Help was coming, and when it arrived, everything would change. 20 minutes passed slowly. Marcus remained standing with his hands on the car, his back straight despite the discomfort. His shoulders ached from holding the position. His legs were tired, but he refused to show weakness. The officer had told him to stay in this position, and Marcus knew that any movement could be twisted into an excuse for worse treatment. The female officer, whose name tag read Martinez, stood a few feet away. She watched her partner with growing unease. Something about this entire situation felt wrong to her. The driver had been completely respectful. There was no smell of alcohol, no drugs found, nothing to justify this level of scrutiny. But she was younger, less experienced, and afraid to question her senior partner. Officer Derek Sullivan paced back and forth beside Marcus's car, speaking into his radio occasionally and glancing at his watch. The woman recording, Mrs. Helen Patterson, still stood on the sidewalk, her phone held steady. More neighbors had gathered now, about a dozen people scattered along the street, all watching in uncomfortable silence. Sullivan made a show of examining Marcus's military ID again. He held it up to the light as if checking for signs of forgery. "These things are easy to fake," he said loudly, making sure the gathering crowd could hear him. "I have seen it 100 times. Criminals pretending to be military to get sympathy." Marcus said nothing. He had learned long ago that defending yourself to someone determined to believe the worst was pointless. Words would not change Sullivan's mind. Evidence would not change Sullivan's mind. The officer had decided who Marcus was the moment he saw his face through the car window. A young black man in his early 20s approached cautiously from one of the houses. He wore a college sweatshirt and looked nervous. "Excuse me, officer," he said politely. "But I know this man. He visits his mother on this street. Mrs. Thompson, she lives in the blue house on the corner. He is her son." Sullivan whirled around, his face hard. "Did I ask you? Get back to your house before I find a reason to detain you too." The young man raised his hands and backed away, but the fear in his eyes was clear. Mrs. Patterson lowered her phone for a moment to call out to him. "Jimin, it is okay, go home." "I am recording everything." Jimin nodded and hurried back to his house, but Marcus had seen his expression. Another young person learning to fear those who were supposed to protect him. Another lesson in how quickly things could turn dangerous. Marcus felt a deep sadness settle in his chest. This was not the country he had fought for. Or maybe it was, and he had just been lucky enough to avoid this reality for a while. Sullivan walked over to Martinez and spoke in low tones, but Marcus could hear some of it. "This does not feel right," Martinez was saying. "He has been completely cooperative. We have found nothing. Maybe we should just write him a warning and let him go." "Are you questioning me?" Sullivan's voice was sharp. "I know what I am doing. I have been doing this job for 15 years. These people, they are good at playing innocent. Trust your instincts. These people." There it was again. Martinez looked like she wanted to say more but closed her mouth. She walked back to her position, her shoulders tense with conflict. Marcus understood her situation better than she might think. He had been in similar positions in the military, times when he knew a superior officer was wrong but speaking up could destroy his career. The difference was that in the military there were clearer rules, stronger oversight. Here on this street corner, Sullivan's word was law. A car slowed down as it passed. An older white man leaned out the window. "Is everything all right, officers?" Sullivan waved him on. "Police business. Keep moving." But the man had already seen Marcus standing against the car, had seen the military gear scattered on the ground. He pulled over and got out of his car. He was in his 70s with white hair and deeply wrinkled skin. He wore a baseball cap with Korean War veteran embroidered on it. "Son," he said, approaching Marcus carefully. "Are you okay?" Before Marcus could answer, Sullivan stepped between them. "Sir, you need to return to your vehicle. This does not concern you." The old man looked at Sullivan with the kind of stare that came from decades of seeing the world. "I am a veteran. I see military gear on the ground. I see a man being detained who does not look like he has done anything wrong. That concerns me. Sir, final warning. Leave now or I will cite you for obstruction." The old veteran shook his head slowly. "I fought for this country. I fought so people could be free. This does not look like freedom to me." But he walked back to his car, his movement stiff with age and disappointment. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. That old soldier had put his life on the line for ideals, for principles, for a vision of America that was supposed to be fair and just. And here he was, watching those ideals fail on a... Sullivan returned his attention to Marcus. "I am going to ask you some questions, and you better answer truthfully. Where were you really going this afternoon?" "I told you, sir. I was visiting my mother. And I am supposed to believe that? You just happened to be in this neighborhood?" "My mother lives here. She has lived here for 12 years. Sullivan stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, meant only for Marcus. Let me tell you something. I know your type. You come into neighborhoods like this where you do not belong and you bring trouble. I do not care what fake ID you have. I do not care who you called. You are not fooling me. Marcus looked straight ahead, his jaw tight. He wanted to respond. He wanted to list his accomplishments, his years of service, his sacrifice. He wanted to tell Sullivan about the shrapnel scar on his shoulder from an IED in Afghanistan, about the 3 tours, about the soldiers he had led and saved. But he knew it would not matter. To Sullivan, he would always be a threat first, a human being second. Martinez approached again. Sullivan, we really should wrap this up. We have been here over 30 minutes. There is nothing suspicious about this vehicle or this driver. I will decide when we wrap this up, Sullivan snapped. But before he could say more, his radio crackled. Unit 7, what is your status? You have been at that location for 40 minutes. Sullivan grabbed his radio. Status is still in progress. Potential stolen vehicle, uncooperative driver. Marcus could not help himself. The words came out before he could stop them. I have been nothing but cooperative, sir. Sullivan's face went red. Did I ask you to speak? Did I give you permission to talk back to me? He stepped even closer, his hand moving to rest on his belt near his handcuffs. Maybe you need to be restrained. Maybe that will teach you to respect authority. Mrs. Patterson's voice rang out from the sidewalk. Officer Sullivan, that man has been standing there peacefully for 40 minutes. He has answered all your questions. He has done everything you asked. Leave him alone. Sullivan spun around, furious now. Lady, I warned you. Martinez, go tell her that if she does not stop interfering, she will be arrested. Martinez hesitated, then slowly walked toward Mrs. Patterson. When she got close, she spoke quietly. Ma'am, please. I know you are trying to help, but you are just making him angrier. Mrs. Patterson looked at the younger officer with a mixture of pity and disappointment. Then you should stop him. You have a badge too. You have authority too. Use it for good. Martinez said nothing. She just walked back to Sullivan, shaking her head to indicate the woman would not leave. The teenage boy, the one Marcus had seen earlier on the porch, had moved closer. He stood at the edge of his yard now, his phone out, also recording. He was skinny, maybe 16 or 17, with fear written all over his young face. But he stood there anyway, bearing witness. Marcus made eye contact with him again. He gave the smallest nod, trying to send a message. Stay safe, be smart. Remember this. The boy nodded back, his hands shaking as he held his phone steady. Sullivan noticed the boy and started toward him. You kid, what are you doing? I am just standing in my yard, sir, the boy said, his voice cracking slightly. Delete that video. Sir, I am allowed to record police activity. It is my First Amendment right. Sullivan's jaw clenched. I said delete it. That video could compromise an ongoing investigation. The boy looked scared, but he held his ground. No, sir, I am not deleting it. For a moment, Marcus thought Sullivan might actually arrest the teenager for the crime of holding a camera. But Mrs. Patterson stepped forward again. Officer, that young man is doing nothing illegal. Neither am I. If you arrest us for exercising our rights, that will also be recorded and reported. Sullivan looked around at all the witnesses, all the phones pointed at him. This was not going the way he wanted. He had expected to intimidate Marcus, find something illegal, and be the hero who caught a suspicious person in the neighborhood. Instead, he had an audience watching his every move, recording his every word. He turned back to Marcus with renewed aggression, as if proving a point. I am going to search you now. Empty your pockets. Everything on the ground. Sir, you have already searched my car. What probable cause do you have to search my person? The probable cause is you are acting suspicious and you are in a high crime area. Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. This was one of the safest neighborhoods in the city, with expensive homes and nearly zero crime, but he knew better than to point that out. Instead, he carefully emptied his pockets. His wallet, which Sullivan had already seen, his keys, some loose change, a receipt from lunch with his mother. Sullivan examined each item as if it might reveal some hidden criminal activity. He found nothing, of course, because there was nothing to find. His frustration grew more visible with each empty pocket. What about drugs? Are you carrying any narcotics? No, sir. You sure about that? Because I can bring a K9 unit here, and if that dog alerts, things will get much worse for you. Marcus took a slow breath. He had faced enemy fire in Afghanistan. He had led soldiers through ambushes and firefights. He had made split-second decisions that determined who lived and died. And yet this moment, standing unarmed on an American street being threatened by an American police officer, felt more terrifying than any combat he had experienced. Because in combat, the rules were clear. Here there were no rules that would protect him. "Officer," Martinez said quietly, "the K-9 unit is not available, and we really do not have cause to hold him any longer." Sullivan shot her a look that could melt steel. "When I want your opinion, I will ask for it." The radio crackled again. This time a different voice. "Unit 7 dispatch. We have a call coming from Fort Benning Military Police. They are asking about your status and location." Sullivan grabbed the radio. "Tell them it is none of their business. This is a civilian traffic stop. They say they have an officer en route to your location. ETA 10 minutes. Sullivan looked at Marcus with new suspicion. "What did you do?" "What did you tell them?" Marcus remained calm. "I told them exactly where I am and that I needed assistance." "Assistance? You think the military is going to help you?" "You are in my jurisdiction now. We will see, sir." Those 3 words hung in the air. Something in Marcus's tone, some absolute certainty, made Sullivan pause. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed the officer's face. What if this man really was military? What if he really was someone important? But Sullivan had gone too far to back down now. With all these witnesses watching, with his authority being questioned, he had to commit to his course. To admit he was wrong would be to admit he had harassed an innocent man for no reason other than the color of his skin. "I do not care who shows up," Sullivan said loudly. "I am in charge of this stop. This is my scene." Mrs. Patterson's voice came again, steady and strong. "Officer Sullivan, you need to listen to yourself. You have detained this man for almost an hour. You have found nothing. He has been respectful and cooperative. What are you really doing here?" Sullivan ignored her. He paced back and forth, checking his watch, glancing down the street as if looking for something or someone. The confidence from earlier had cracked. Underneath it, Marcus could see fear beginning to form. The fear of being wrong, of being exposed, of consequences. Martinez stood apart from her partner now, her body language distancing herself from his actions. She looked at Marcus with something like apology in her eyes, but sorry looks did not stop abuse. Only actions did, and she was taking no action. The old Korean War veteran had not left. His car was still parked down the street, and Marcus could see him sitting inside watching. More proof that people were paying attention, more evidence being gathered. The boy on the lawn had been joined by his mother, a Korean woman who stood with her hand on his shoulder. She looked terrified but proud of her son for standing his ground. She did not make him go inside. She just stood with him, both of them bearing witness to an injustice they could not stop but refused to ignore. 9 minutes had passed since the radio call about military police. Sullivan grew more agitated with each passing minute. He searched Marcus's car again, going through the same spaces he had already checked, hoping to find something he had missed. He found nothing. 8 minutes. Martinez tried one more time. "Sullivan, we should let him go. We have nothing. This is going to look bad." "Shut up, Martinez. Just shut up." 7 minutes. The sound of engines in the distance. Sullivan heard it too. He turned toward the sound, his hand instinctively moving near his weapon. 6 minutes. 3 large military vehicles came into view, moving down the street with purpose. A Humvee in front, followed by 2 trucks. They were not speeding, not running lights, but their presence was unmistakable. 5 minutes. The vehicles pulled up and parked, creating a semicircle around the scene. Sullivan stood frozen, watching. Martinez stepped back, her eyes wide. 4 minutes. The door of the first Humvee opened. A woman stepped out, and every person on that street knew immediately that she was someone important. She wore a military dress uniform with more ribbons and badges than most people would earn in a lifetime. Her posture was perfect, her expression controlled but cold. 3 minutes. 2 military police officers exited the other vehicles, followed by a captain. They formed up behind the woman, waiting for her lead. 2 minutes. The woman walked forward with measured steps. She did not look at Sullivan or Martinez. She looked only at Marcus. 1 minute. She stopped 3 feet away from Marcus and spoke in a voice that carried authority earned through decades of command. "Colonel Thompson." The name rang out across the street like a bell. "Colonel." "Not Mr. Not sir, Colonel." Sullivan's face went pale. Martinez's mouth fell open. Mrs. Patterson smiled for the first time in an hour. And Marcus, still standing with his back straight despite the ache in his shoulders, despite the exhaustion in his legs, despite the weight of humiliation and anger and sadness, finally allowed himself a small breath of relief. Help had arrived, and everything was about to change. Brigadier General Patricia Winters stood before Marcus like a force of nature contained in a perfectly pressed uniform. Her silver hair was cut short and professional. Her dark eyes had seen combat in 3 different countries. She was 58 years old and had commanded thousands of soldiers over a career spanning 36 years. Nothing about her suggested she was here for a friendly visit. She did not acknowledge Sullivan or Martinez. Her full attention was on Marcus. "Colonel Thompson, are you injured?" Her voice was calm but carried an edge that made everyone on the street stand a little straighter. "No, ma'am, I am not injured," Marcus replied. His voice was steady, falling automatically into military formality. "Are you under arrest?" "I do not believe so, ma'am. I was told it was a traffic stop." General Winters turned slightly, finally looking at Sullivan. Her gaze moved from his face to his name tag to his badge number. She was memorizing every detail. Then she looked at Martinez, giving her the same thorough examination. "I am Brigadier General Patricia Winters from Fort Benning," she said clearly. Her words were not just for the officers, but for every witness with a phone recording. "I received a call from Colonel Marcus Thompson requesting assistance. Can someone explain to me why a decorated Army colonel has been detained on the side of the road for over an hour?" Sullivan found his voice, though it came out weaker than before. "Ma'am, this is a civilian matter." "A traffic stop. With all due respect, the military has no jurisdiction here." "You are correct. The military has no jurisdiction over civilian traffic stops." Winters took one step forward. It was a small movement, but the power behind it made Sullivan step back. "However, when one of my officers reports that he is being detained and treated with disrespect, I have every right to ensure his welfare. So I will ask again, why has Colonel Thompson been standing here for over an hour?" Martinez spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "General, he was pulled over for rolling through a stop sign. Officer Sullivan believed the vehicle might be stolen. Based on what evidence?" "Based on—" Martinez trailed off. She looked at Sullivan, but he offered no help. "Based on observation." "Observation?" Winters repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "And what did this observation reveal? Did you find evidence the vehicle was stolen?" "No, ma'am. The vehicle is registered to Colonel Thompson." "Did you find any contraband? Any weapons? Any drugs? Anything illegal?" "No, ma'am." "Did Colonel Thompson resist arrest or refuse to cooperate in any way?" Martinez hesitated. She looked at Marcus, then at the ground. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "No, ma'am. He was cooperative the entire time." Winters let that sink in. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Then she turned back to Marcus. "Colonel, I need you to give me a full report of what happened here. Start from the beginning." Marcus finally moved from his position against the car. His shoulders ached as he stood at attention. His back hurt, but his voice was clear and professional as he recounted the events. He spoke like he was giving a briefing to superior officers, stating facts without emotion. He described being pulled over. He described the officer's immediate change in demeanor. He described being ordered from his vehicle, being accused of theft, having his military ID dismissed as fake. He described the rough search of his car, his personal items thrown on the ground. He described standing in this position for over an hour while being interrogated about how he could afford his own vehicle. Through it all, Winters listened without interrupting. Her expression never changed, but a muscle in her jaw tightened with each detail. When Marcus finished, Winters turned to Sullivan. "Is this account accurate?" Sullivan's face had gone from pale to red. "I was doing my job." He was suspicious. He matched a description of someone involved in a robbery. "What robbery?" Winters asked immediately. "There was a report from earlier this week." What robbery?" Winters repeated, her voice harder. "Give me specifics. Date, time, location, description of the suspect." Sullivan stammered. "I would have to check the reports. I do not have them with me. How convenient." Winters gestured to one of the MPs who had arrived with her. "Captain Lee, contact dispatch. Ask them to provide details of any robbery reports from this area in the past 2 weeks. I want victim descriptions, suspect descriptions, everything." Captain Lee pulled out his radio and stepped away to make the call. Sullivan watched him go. his face showing that he knew what the answer would be. There was no robbery report. There was no description. There was only a black man driving through a neighborhood where Sullivan thought he did not belong. Mrs. Patterson approached slowly, still holding her phone. "General, excuse me. I am Helen Patterson. I recorded this entire interaction. I would like to provide this video as evidence." Winters turned to her and her expression softened slightly. "Thank you, ma'am. That would be very helpful." She looked at the other neighbors who had gathered. "Did anyone else record this incident?" Several hands went up. The teenage boy stepped forward nervously. "I did, ma'am. I recorded most of it. What is your name, son?" "Jimin Park, ma'am." Winters nodded at him with approval. "Thank you for your courage, Jimin. Please send that video to the email address Captain Lee will provide. Your willingness to stand up and document injustice is exactly the kind of citizenship this country needs." Jimin stood a little taller, his fear replaced with pride. His mother squeezed his shoulder, her eyes wet with tears. The old Korean War veteran had gotten out of his car and walked closer. Winters noticed him and saw the cap he wore. She walked over to him and saluted. "Thank you for your service, sir." The old man returned the salute with a shaky hand. "You too, General. You are doing a good thing here today. I just wish it was not necessary." "So do I, sir. So do I." Captain Lee returned from his radio call. "Ma'am, dispatch confirms there have been no robbery reports in this area for the past month. The last reported theft was a bicycle stolen from a yard 3 weeks ago." Sullivan's shoulders sagged. Martinez looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. Winters turned back to Sullivan with cold precision. "So there was no robbery? No description to match? No stolen vehicle? No drugs, no weapons? No resistance, nothing?" She paused. "What you had was a black man driving through a neighborhood and you decided he must be a criminal. Is that accurate?" "I was following my training," Sullivan said, but his voice had lost all its earlier authority. "We are taught to trust our instincts, to look for things that seem out of place." "Out of place," Winters repeated. "Colonel Thompson was visiting his mother, a woman who has lived in this neighborhood for over a decade. He was driving to and from her house. What exactly was out of place? Be specific." Sullivan could not answer. The truth was too ugly to say out loud, though everyone standing there knew it. Martinez spoke up suddenly. "General, I need to say something." Her voice was stronger now, though her hands shook. "This is not the first time. Officer Sullivan has a pattern. I have seen it before. I never spoke up because I was afraid, but I cannot stay silent anymore." Sullivan spun toward her. "Martinez, shut your mouth. You do not know what you are talking about." "I know exactly what I am talking about," Martinez said, her voice rising. "I have watched you pull over black drivers for minor violations that you let white drivers get away with. I have watched you search their cars when you had no reason. I have heard the things you say when you think no one is listening. You are lying. You are just trying to save yourself. I am trying to do the right thing, finally." Martinez looked at Winters. "I should have spoken up before. I should have reported this. I was a coward and I am sorry, but I can provide specific dates, specific stops, specific people who were treated the way Colonel Thompson was treated today." General Winters gestured to one of the MPs. "Sergeant, please take Officer Martinez's statement. Get all the details." She pulled out her phone. "I am going to call your police chief." "What is his name?" Sullivan said nothing. Mrs. Patterson answered. "Chief Raymond Davis, ma'am."
"He is a good man."
"He will want to know about this." Winters nodded and stepped away to make the call. The crowd on the street had grown to nearly 30 people now. They stood in clusters, some still recording, others just watching. The mood had shifted from fearful to something else, something like hope mixed with anger. They were seeing something they rarely saw, accountability happening in real time. Marcus remained standing, his military bearing intact, despite everything. The teenage boy approached him cautiously. "Sir, are you really a colonel?" "I am," Marcus replied gently. "How long have you been in the army?" 24 years. The boy's eyes widened. "And he still treated you like that?" Marcus looked at the boy, seeing the innocence breaking in his young eyes, seeing the hard lesson being learned. "Yes, he did. That is not fair. No, it is not fair. But you did the right thing by recording, by standing witness. Never be afraid to speak up when you see injustice." The boy nodded seriously, like he was receiving orders from a commanding officer. In a way he was. Jimin's mother approached and bowed slightly. "Thank you for your service, Colonel. And I am sorry this happened to you. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for raising a brave son. Not every parent would let their child stand up like that. She smiled through her tears. He learned it from watching his grandfather. He was in the Korean military. He always said that silence helps the oppressor, never the victim. Marcus felt that wisdom settle over him. Silence helps the oppressor. How many times had good people stayed silent? How many times had Martinez watched her partner target innocent people and said nothing? How many times had witnesses looked away rather than getting involved? But not today. Today people had stood up. Today people had recorded. Today voices had been raised. Mrs. Patterson came over to Marcus and handed him a bottle of water. You have been standing there for so long. You must be thirsty. Marcus accepted it gratefully. Thank you, ma'am. You did not have to stay. You did not have to record. But you did, why? Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. My husband was a sergeant. He served in Vietnam. He was black. And when he came home, he was treated like this more times than I can count. Pulled over for nothing. Searched for nothing. Humiliated for nothing. She wiped her eyes. He died 5 years ago. But if he were here, he would have done exactly what I did. He would have stood witness. He would have recorded. Because he believed in justice even when justice did not believe in him. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. Your husband was a good man, and you honor his memory by standing up today. General Winters returned from her phone call. Her expression was grim but satisfied. Chief Davis is on his way. He is not happy. He said this is the third complaint about Officer Sullivan in 6 months, but the other 2 were buried by Sullivan's union representative. She looked directly at Sullivan. That ends today. A new vehicle pulled up, this one an unmarked police car. A tall black man in his 60s stepped out, wearing a police chief's uniform. His face was set in hard lines. Chief Raymond Davis had worked his way up through the ranks over 40 years, facing discrimination and obstacles at every turn. He had zero tolerance for officers who abused their power, especially when that abuse was rooted in racism. He walked straight to General Winters and extended his hand. General, I am Chief Davis. I apologize that you had to be called here for this situation. Chief, I appreciate you coming so quickly. Davis turned to Marcus. Colonel Thompson, I am deeply sorry for what you have experienced today. This does not represent the values of our department or the conduct we expect from our officers. Thank you. Chief, Marcus replied. Davis then turned to Sullivan, and his expression went from apologetic to ice cold. Sullivan, give me your badge and your weapon. Right now. Sullivan's eyes went wide. Chief, you cannot do this. I have rights. I have union representation, and you will get your due process, but right now you are suspended pending a full investigation. Badge and weapon. Now. Sullivan's hands shook as he unclipped his badge and removed his service weapon. He handed them over like he was giving away pieces of himself. In a way, he was. Being a police officer was not just his job. It was his identity, and that identity was being stripped away in front of witnesses, in front of cameras, in front of the very man he had humiliated. Davis turned to Martinez. Officer Martinez, you will also be suspended while we investigate your role in this incident. However, your willingness to come forward and provide testimony will be noted in your record. Martinez nodded, tears running down her face. She removed her badge and weapon as well. Chief Davis addressed the crowd that had gathered. To everyone who recorded this incident, please provide your contact information to Captain Lee. We will need those recordings for our investigation. Your willingness to stand up and document what you saw is vital to ensuring justice. Several people moved forward to provide their information. The teenage boy Jimin was among them. So was Mrs. Patterson. So was the old Korean War veteran whose name was Harold Wilson. General Winters placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Colonel, we need to get you checked out by medical. Standard procedure after a detention like this. Marcus shook his head. I am fine, ma'am. I was not injured. Physical injuries are not the only kind that matter, Winters said gently. You have been through a traumatic experience. Let the doctors look at you. Marcus wanted to refuse again to maintain his strong front, but the general's kindness after an hour of cruelty broke through his defenses. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Before leaving, Marcus walked over to his car where his belongings were still scattered on the ground. His uniform, his boots, his personal items, all treated like garbage. He began picking them up carefully, folding his uniform with the same precision he had learned in basic training decades ago. Several people moved to help him. Mrs. Patterson picked up his boots. Jimin collected the items from his pockets. The old veteran, Mr. Wilson, carefully folded Marcus's other uniform shirt. They worked in silence, this group of strangers united by what they had witnessed. When everything was back in the duffel bag, when the trunk was closed, when Marcus's belongings were treated with the respect they deserved, Marcus looked at each person who had helped. "Thank you," he said simply. "All of you. You did not have to stand with me today, but you did. That means more than you know." Mrs. Patterson hugged him, not asking permission, just pulling him into an embrace that felt like motherly protection. "You take care of yourself, Colonel. And you remember that there are more good people than bad in this world. Today proved that." Marcus nodded against her shoulder, letting himself be vulnerable for just a moment. Then he pulled back, wiped his eyes, and straightened his shoulders once more. General Winters gestured to the Humvee. "Come on, Colonel. Let's get you out of here." As Marcus walked toward the military vehicle, he turned back one last time. He looked at Jimin Park, the teenager who had been brave enough to record despite his fear. He pulled something from his pocket, a coin he always carried. It was a challenge coin from his unit, given to soldiers who showed exceptional courage. He walked over to Jimin and pressed the coin into the young man's hand. "This is for you, for your courage today. Keep it as a reminder that standing up for what is right is never easy, but it is always worth it." Jimin looked at the coin, his eyes wide with wonder. "Sir, I cannot take this. This is yours. Now it is yours. You earned it." The boy closed his fist around the coin and nodded, unable to speak through his emotion. Marcus climbed into the Humvee. As the vehicles pulled away from the curb, he looked back at the scene one last time. He saw Sullivan standing there without his badge, looking small and defeated. He saw Martinez crying, facing the consequences of her silence. He saw Chief Davis talking with witnesses, beginning the work of accountability. He saw neighbors returning to their homes, changed by what they had witnessed. And he saw Jimin Park still standing in his yard, looking at the challenge coin in his hand like it was a treasure. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. It was beautiful, but Marcus could not fully appreciate it. His mind was replaying the past hour over and over. The fear, the humiliation, the anger, the helplessness. He had fought for this country. He had bled for it, and still, on a peaceful suburban street, he had been treated like a criminal because of the color of his skin. The injustice of it burned in his chest. But so did something else, hope. Because people had stood up, people had recorded, people had spoken truth to power. It was not enough. Not nearly enough. But it was a start. As the Humvee drove through the darkening streets, Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow he would still be a black man in America. Tomorrow he would still have to be careful during every traffic stop. Tomorrow the fight for justice would continue. But tonight at least there had been accountability. Tonight at least voices had been raised. Tonight at least a young man had learned that courage matters, and sometimes that had to be enough. 3 days had passed since the incident on Oak Street. Marcus sat in a conference room at Fort Benning, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Across from him sat Captain Sarah Chen, an Army lawyer assigned to his case. She was young, maybe in her early 30s, but she had sharp eyes and a reputation for being thorough. "Colonel, I need you to walk me through it one more time," Captain Chen said gently. "I know you have told this story several times, but details matter. Every word matters." Marcus nodded and began again. Each time he told the story, it became a little easier. The emotions grew less raw, though they never disappeared. He described the traffic stop, Sullivan's changing demeanor, the search, the accusations. Captain Chen took notes, occasionally stopping him to ask for clarification. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. "The video evidence from multiple witnesses matches your account exactly. Officer Sullivan's body camera was conveniently turned off during most of the interaction. Officer Martinez's camera was on, but Sullivan positioned himself to block many of her shots." "Of course he did," Marcus said quietly. "The good news is that the civilian recordings are clear and complete. Mrs. Patterson's video in particular is very detailed. She never stopped recording, not once." Captain Chen pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a document. This is the official complaint filed by General Winters on your behalf. Chief Davis has also opened an internal investigation, and based on what Officer Martinez revealed, they are reviewing all of Sullivan's traffic stops from the past 2 years. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. How many stops are we talking about? Over 300. They are looking specifically at stops involving black drivers and other minorities. So far, they have found a pattern. Sullivan pulls over black drivers at a rate 4 times higher than his colleagues, and his searches of those vehicles happen at a rate 6 times higher. And they never noticed this before? Captain Chen's expression darkened. They noticed. 2 complaints were filed in the past 18 months. Both were dismissed after union review. Sullivan had explanations for each one, and the union backed him up. Without video evidence or multiple complaints about the same incident, they let it slide. So how many people did he do this to? How many people did he humiliate and terrorize because of the color of their skin? Marcus felt anger rising in his chest again. We do not know yet, but Chief Davis is trying to find out. He has assigned a team to contact every person Sullivan pulled over in the past 2 years. They are asking for statements for any recordings people might have, for any evidence of misconduct. Marcus rubbed his face with his hands. This is bigger than me. Yes, sir, it is. Your case is getting national attention. The video has gone viral. News outlets are calling it another example of racial profiling. Some media are calling you a hero for staying calm. I am not a hero, Marcus said firmly. Heroes charge into danger to save others. I just tried to survive a traffic stop. There should not be anything heroic about that. Captain Chen was quiet for a moment. You are right, sir. There should not be. But in the world we live in, staying calm while being mistreated is seen as heroic. That says something terrible about our society. There was a knock on the door. General Winters entered, her presence immediately commanding attention. Both Marcus and Captain Chen stood. At ease, Winters said, waving them back to their seats. She pulled out a chair and sat down. Colonel Thompson, how are you holding up? I am fine, ma'am, Marcus replied automatically. Winters gave him a look that said she did not believe him. Marcus, you do not have to be fine. You went through something traumatic. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to be shaken. This is not a weakness report. Marcus felt something break inside him at her kindness. Throughout his career, he had always been expected to be strong, to show no weakness, to soldier on regardless of circumstances. Admitting struggle felt like admitting failure. I keep thinking about the what-ifs, he said quietly. What if I had moved wrong? What if Sullivan had claimed I reached for something? What if he had shot me? My wife, my kids, they could have gotten a phone call saying I was dead, killed during a traffic stop, and half the country would have assumed I must have done something to deserve it. Winters nodded slowly. Those what-ifs are valid, and they are exactly why we are pursuing this so aggressively. No soldier should have to fear for their life during a routine traffic stop in their own country. But it is not just soldiers, ma'am. It is every black person. Every day. I was lucky because I could call you, because I had rank and resources. What about the people who do not? What about the kid working at a grocery store? Or the teacher or the mechanic? They face this same threat and have no one to call. You are absolutely right, Winters said, which is why your case matters. Because you do have a platform. You do have rank. You can shine a light on something that happens in the shadows every day. Captain Chen pulled up another document on her tablet. Sir, several civil rights organizations have reached out. They want to support your case. The NAACP, the ACLU, and others. They see this as an opportunity to push for policy changes. Marcus felt overwhelmed. I just wanted to visit my mother. I did not ask to become a symbol. None of us ask for the roles history gives us, Winters said. But sometimes we have to accept them anyway. You have a choice, Colonel. You can handle this quietly. Let the military and police handle it internally and move on. Or you can stand up publicly, tell your story, and use your voice to push for change. Either choice is valid. Marcus thought about Jimin Park, the teenager who had recorded the incident. He thought about the courage it took for that young man to stand his ground and document injustice. He thought about all the other Jimins out there, young people learning that the world was not fair, that the color of their skin made them targets. What would standing up publicly involve? He asked. Captain Chen scrolled through her notes. Press interviews, most likely. Several news programs have requested to talk with you. Some civil rights organizations want you to speak at events. There is talk of congressional hearings on police reform. and they would like your testimony. That sounds like a lot of attention. It is, Winters confirmed, and I will not lie to you. It will be difficult. People will criticize you. Some will claim you are exaggerating or seeking attention. Others will dig into your past looking for anything to discredit you. The ugliness you faced on that street will follow you in different forms. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his family, his children. He thought about his soldiers, the men and women he led. He thought about the oath he had taken to protect and defend the Constitution. I need to talk to my family first, he said finally. This affects them too. They deserve a say in this decision. Of course, Winters said. Take the time you need. The investigation will continue regardless. But if you decide to speak out, we will support you completely. After the meeting, Marcus drove home. His wife, Jennifer, was waiting for him. She had taken time off work when she heard what happened, wanting to be there for him. Their children, Maya and David, were both home as well. Maya had driven back from college and David had been excused from school. They sat together in the living room, the whole family gathered. Marcus told them about the meeting, about the investigation, about the opportunity to speak publicly. Jennifer held his hand tightly. She was a teacher, strong and practical, with a quiet strength that had supported Marcus through 3 deployments and countless challenges. What do you want to do? She asked. I do not know, Marcus admitted. Part of me wants to just put this behind us and move on. But another part feels like I cannot stay silent. Not when so many people deal with this every day, Maya spoke up. She was 19, studying political science at Howard University. Dad, I've been reading the comments on the videos online. Some people are calling you a hero. Others are saying you must have done something wrong, that the video does not show everything. It is brutal out there. I know, sweetheart. But here is the thing. People are talking about it. My friends at school, they are having conversations about police brutality and racial profiling. People who never thought about it before are seeing it clearly now. Your experience is opening eyes. Maya leaned forward. If you speak out, you could help change things. Not just for us, but for everyone. David, who was 16 and usually quiet, cleared his throat. I am scared for you, Dad. What if speaking out makes you a target? What if someone comes after you? Marcus pulled his son close. That is a valid fear. There are people who will not like what I have to say. But staying silent does not keep us safe either. Silence did not protect me on that street. Silence has never protected people who look like us. Jennifer squeezed his hand again. Whatever you decide, we are with you. But I want you to know something. I am proud of how you handled that situation. You kept your calm. You stayed dignified. You survived, and that took more strength than any battle you have fought. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. I was terrified. I know you were. But you did not let that terror control you. That is real courage. They talked for hours, weighing options, discussing fears, considering consequences. Finally, they reached a decision together. Marcus would speak out. He would tell his story. He would use his platform to push for change. The next morning, Marcus called Captain Chen and told her his decision. Within hours, interviews were being scheduled. The first would be with a national news program, a respected journalist known for handling difficult topics with sensitivity. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a television studio, makeup applied to reduce the shine from the lights, a small microphone clipped to his shirt. Across from him sat Michelle Roberts, a veteran journalist with silver hair and sharp intelligence in her eyes. Colonel Thompson, thank you for agreeing to speak with us, Michelle began. Thank you for having me. Let us start with the basic facts. You are a colonel in the United States Army. You have served for 24 years. You have completed 3 tours in Afghanistan. You have earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And on the evening of October 23rd, you were pulled over during what should have been a routine traffic stop. Can you tell us what happened? Marcus took a deep breath and began. He told the story calmly, factually, without exaggeration. He described Sullivan's behavior, the accusations, the search, the humiliation. He talked about standing against his car for over an hour, while being treated like a criminal. Michelle listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she asked, "What were you thinking during that hour?" "I was thinking about my family. I was thinking about all the news stories I have heard about black men dying during traffic stops. I was thinking that one wrong move, one misunderstood gesture could end my life. And I was thinking about how unfair it was that I had to think about those things at all. You stayed remarkably calm in the video. How did you manage that? Training, mostly. The military teaches you to stay calm under pressure, but also fear. I knew that showing anger or frustration could be used as an excuse to escalate. So I had to suppress every natural reaction and just comply. Even when I was being insulted. Even when my belongings were being thrown on the ground. Even when I was being accused of crimes I did not commit. Michelle leaned forward. Some people watching this might say you are lucky. That because of your rank you were able to call for help. That the situation ended better than it could have. That is true, Marcus acknowledged. I was lucky. But that is exactly the problem. Justice should not depend on luck. Justice should not depend on having a general you can call. Justice should be available to everyone equally, regardless of rank or resources or connections. What do you want people to understand from your experience? Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I want people to understand that this is not rare. This happens every day to Black people across this country. We are pulled over more often. We are searched more often. We are assumed to be criminals more often. And we have to make impossible calculations every single time. Do I comply even when it is unjust? Do I speak up even when it is dangerous? Do I reach for my license even when that movement might be misinterpreted? What needs to change? Everything. Marcus's voice was firm. We need better training for police officers. We need accountability when officers abuse their power. We need to end qualified immunity that protects bad cops. We need civilian oversight boards with real power. We need to address the racism that makes officers see people like me as threats rather than citizens. He paused. But most of all, we need people to care. We need people to believe us when we say this is happening. We need people to speak up when they witness injustice. We need people to use their privilege and power to demand change. The interview continued for another 30 minutes. Michelle asked tough questions and Marcus answered honestly. He talked about his fear, his anger, his determination. He talked about the witnesses who stood up, especially Mrs. Patterson and Jim and Park. He talked about the importance of recording police encounters. When the interview ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Michelle shook his hand. That was powerful, Colonel. Your honesty is going to reach a lot of people. I hope so, Marcus replied. Because if my experience can prevent even one person from going through the same thing, it will be worth it. The interview aired 2 days later. Within hours, it had millions of views online. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people praised Marcus's courage. Others criticized him, claiming he was exaggerating or playing the race card. Some defended Officer Sullivan, saying he was just doing his job. Marcus read some of the comments, then stopped. Jennifer found him sitting in his home office, staring at the computer screen. Do not read those, she said gently, closing the laptop. I need to know what people are saying. No, you do not. You know the truth. The video shows the truth. The witnesses confirmed the truth. What random people on the internet say does not change that. Marcus pulled Jennifer close. This is harder than I thought it would be. I know, but you are not alone. We are here. Your soldiers support you. Good people everywhere support you. As if to prove her point, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jim and Park, the teenager who had recorded the incident. Colonel Thompson, I saw your interview. You were amazing. Thank you for speaking up for all of us. I will never forget your courage. Marcus smiled for the first time in days. He texted back, thank you, Jim, and your courage came first. You showed me that young people are not afraid to stand up for what is right. That gives me hope. More messages came in over the following days. Soldiers he had served with reached out to share their own experiences with discrimination. Strangers sent emails thanking him for his honesty. Some people sent hate mail, ugly words filled with racism and threats, but those were outnumbered by messages of support. General Winters called with an update on the investigation. Sullivan has been officially terminated. The police union tried to fight it, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Chief Davis found 14 other cases where Sullivan engaged in clear racial profiling. Several of those people are now filing civil rights lawsuits. What about Martinez? Marcus asked. She has been suspended for 60 days without pay. She is also required to complete additional training on intervention and reporting misconduct. Chief Davis said she can return to duty after that, but she will be on probation for a year. That seems fair. She made mistakes, but she also came forward when it mattered. I agree. She has also volunteered to help train other officers on recognizing and reporting misconduct. That is a positive step. Marcus felt some of the weight lift from his shoulders. Justice was slow, imperfect, and incomplete. But it was happening. Sullivan was no longer a police officer. Martinez was facing consequences but also had a chance at redemption. The system was being examined and questioned. It was not enough. It would never be enough until these incidents stopped happening altogether. But it was progress. That evening, Marcus sat with his family for dinner. They talked about normal things: Maya's classes, David's basketball team, Jennifer's work. They laughed together, found joy in small moments, reminded themselves that life continued beyond the trauma. As Marcus looked around the table at the faces he loved most in the world, he felt grateful. Grateful to be alive. Grateful to have a family that supported him. Grateful to live in a time when cameras and witnesses could expose injustice instead of letting it hide in the shadows. The fight was not over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But Marcus was ready. He had faced enemy fire in Afghanistan. He had led soldiers through impossible situations. He had survived an hour of humiliation and fear on an American street. He was a soldier, and this was his new mission: to speak truth, to demand change, to make sure that the next black man pulled over for a traffic stop would not have to feel the same terror he had felt. It would take time. It would take effort. It would take courage from many people, not just him. But if there was one thing Marcus had learned in 24 years of military service, it was that the hardest missions were always worth fighting for. And this mission, the fight for justice and equality, was worth everything. 6 weeks after the incident, Marcus stood in front of a packed auditorium at the police academy. Chief Raymond Davis had invited him to speak to new recruits about dignity, respect, and what it meant to serve all citizens equally. Marcus had been nervous about accepting, worried that his presence would be seen as an attack on all police officers. But Davis had been insistent. "These young people need to hear your story," Davis had said. "They need to understand the real-world consequences of bias and poor judgment. They need to know that the badge is not a shield for prejudice." Now, looking out at the sea of young faces, Marcus saw hope mixed with uncertainty. These recruits were just starting their careers. They had not yet been hardened by years of seeing the worst of humanity. They had not yet developed the cynicism that sometimes came with the job. They were still idealistic, still believing they could make a difference. Marcus cleared his throat and began. "My name is Colonel Marcus Thompson. I have served in the United States Army for 24 years. I have led soldiers in combat. I have been shot at, blown up, and left for dead. I have faced situations where death was seconds away and survival depended on split-second decisions." He paused, letting that sink in. "But 6 weeks ago, I experienced one of the most terrifying moments of my life. Not in Afghanistan, not on a battlefield, but on a quiet street in Georgia during a traffic stop. I was terrified because I knew that my life was in someone else's hands and that person had already decided I was guilty of something based solely on the color of my skin." The room was completely silent. Every eye was on Marcus. "I am not here to tell you that all police officers are bad. That would be a lie. I know many good officers. Chief Davis is one of them. Many of you will become good officers. But I am here to tell you that good intentions are not enough. Being a good person is not enough. You must actively fight against bias, against prejudice, against the part of you that might see someone like me as a threat rather than a citizen." Marcus described the traffic stop in detail. He did not spare the difficult parts. He talked about Sullivan's tone, his assumptions, his behavior. He talked about the fear that gripped him, the calculations he had to make, the dignity he had to fight to maintain. Every person you encounter on the job is someone's father, mother, son, daughter, friend. They are real people with real lives, real families, real dreams. Your badge gives you authority. It gives you power. But it does not give you the right to treat people as less than human. A hand went up in the audience. Marcus nodded at a young woman in the third row. "Sir, how do we know when we are being biased? Sometimes we do not even realize we have assumptions." It was a good question, honest and thoughtful. Marcus appreciated it. "That is exactly right," he said. "Most bias is unconscious. We all have it, myself included. The key is to be aware of it and actively work against it. Ask yourself questions. Why did I pull this car over? Would I have pulled over a white driver for the same thing? Am I searching this vehicle because I have real evidence or because I have a feeling? Am I treating this person with the same respect I would want for my own family? Another hand went up. A young man near the back. But sir, police work is dangerous. We are taught to be cautious, to watch for threats. How do we balance that with not being biased? Marcus nodded. You are right that police work is dangerous, and you should be cautious. But there is a difference between being alert and being prejudiced. Being cautious means watching everyone's hands, being aware of your surroundings, having an exit strategy. Being prejudiced means assuming someone is dangerous because of their skin color, their neighborhood, their appearance. He thought about how to explain this clearly. Let me give you an example. When Officer Sullivan pulled me over, he had legitimate reason to approach with caution. Any traffic stop can be dangerous. But once he saw my face, his caution became prejudice. He did not see a man visiting his mother. He saw a threat. He did not look for evidence of wrongdoing. He assumed wrongdoing and searched for evidence to support that assumption. That is the difference, the questions continued. The recruits were engaged, thinking critically, wrestling with difficult concepts. Marcus was encouraged by their willingness to listen and learn. After the presentation, several recruits came up to speak with him privately. One young black man thanked him with tears in his eyes. Sir, I joined the force to make a difference, but my family is scared for me. They think I will be treated the way you were treated. Seeing you speak up gives me hope that things can change. Marcus shook his hand firmly. Things can change, but they will only change if good people like you enter the profession and refuse to accept the status quo. Be the officer you wish had pulled me over that day. An older white recruit, a military veteran making a career change, approached. Colonel, I served in the Marines. I thought I understood what it meant to face danger. But listening to you describe that traffic stop, I realized I have never had to fear for my life in that way. I have never had to worry that a police officer might kill me because of how I look. Thank you for opening my eyes. Thank you for being willing to learn, Marcus replied. Chief Davis found Marcus after the recruits had left. That was powerful, Colonel. Exactly what these young people needed to hear. I hope it makes a difference, in Amaris it will. Not overnight and not for everyone. Some of them will forget this talk a month from now, but others will remember. Others will think twice before making assumptions. Others will speak up when they see colleagues going down the wrong path. Davis paused. Change happens one person at a time. You changed some people today. Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility. One speech could not fix systemic racism. One story could not end police brutality. But if even a few of those recruits took his words to heart, if even a few of them became officers who saw people rather than threats, then it was worth it. Over the following weeks, Marcus received more invitations to speak. A church group wanted to hear his story. A community organization asked him to join a panel on police reform. A university invited him to speak to criminal justice students. He accepted what he could, balancing these commitments with his military duties. Each time he told his story, it got a little easier. The emotions were still there, but they were less raw, and each time he saw the impact in people's faces. He saw understanding dawn. He saw assumptions challenged. He saw minds opening to realities they had not considered before. But the most meaningful impact came from unexpected places. One afternoon, Marcus received a letter in the mail. It was from a woman named Lisa Martinez, Officer Martinez's sister. She wrote about growing up with her sister, about how Jennifer had always wanted to help people, how she had joined the police force with the best intentions, but somewhere along the way, fear had made her silent. Fear of rocking the boat, fear of being labeled a troublemaker, fear of losing her job. Your courage helped my sister find her own courage, Lisa wrote. She knows she should have spoken up sooner. She knows her silence allowed Officer Sullivan to hurt other people, but she is trying to make it right now. She is teaching other officers about intervention. She is speaking at community meetings. She is facing her mistakes instead of running from them. Thank you for showing her that it is never too late to do the right thing. Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer where he kept important things. Officer Martinez had made serious mistakes. Her silence had consequences. But she was trying to do better now, and that mattered. Another letter came from Harold Wilson, the elderly Korean War veteran, who had stopped to check on Marcus during the traffic stop. His handwriting was shaky but clear. Colonel Thompson, I am 87 years old. I have seen a lot in my life. I fought in a war. I marched for civil rights. I watched this country make progress and slide backward and make progress again. Seeing you stand tall that day reminded me why the fight matters. Old men like me, we get tired. We wonder if anything ever really changes. But then I see young people like Jimin Park standing up with his camera. I see people like you refusing to be silent. And I think maybe, just maybe, we are getting closer to the America we were promised. Thank you for not giving up. Marcus called Mr. Wilson and they talked for an hour. The old veteran shared stories from Korea, from the civil rights movement, from decades of fighting for equality. Marcus listened and learned, understanding that his struggle was part of a longer story, a story that stretched back generations. The fight is long, Mr. Wilson said. Sometimes it feels like we take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But we keep fighting because what else can we do? Giving up is not an option. Marcus thought about those words often in the following days. Meanwhile, the legal consequences for Officer Sullivan continued to unfold. Several people he had targeted filed civil rights lawsuits. The city settled some of them quickly, not wanting the details to come out in court. Others were proceeding to trial. Sullivan himself faced criminal charges for violating civil rights and filing false reports. Marcus received regular updates from Captain Chen about the legal proceedings. Sullivan's lawyer is trying to claim he was just following his training, that he had reason to be suspicious, she explained during one of their meetings. But the pattern is too clear. The video evidence is too strong. He is going to face consequences, whether through criminal conviction or civil penalties. What about the other people he targeted? The ones who came forward? Many of them are getting justice. Some are receiving settlements. Others are just happy to have their stories heard and believed. For years, people complained about Sullivan and were dismissed. Now they have proof that they were telling the truth all along. Marcus felt satisfaction at that, but also sadness. How many years had Sullivan been allowed to operate? How many people had he harmed? How many complaints had been buried or ignored? The system failed them, Marcus said quietly. Yes, it did. But the system is being forced to change now. Chief Davis has implemented new policies. Body cameras must be on at all times. There is a civilian review board with real power. Officers are required to report misconduct they witness. These are real changes, Colonel. Your case helped make them happen. It was progress, but Marcus knew it was not enough. Other cities needed these same reforms. Other departments needed the same oversight. And ultimately, the culture needed to change, not just the policies. One evening, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at home. It was Jimin Park, the teenager who had recorded the traffic stop. He stood on the porch looking nervous, holding a folder. Jimin, come in, Marcus said warmly. What brings you here? Jimin entered the house, greeting Jennifer and the kids politely. Then he sat down and opened the folder. Sir, I have been working on something. After what happened, I started a project at my school. I'm documenting stories of racial profiling in our community. I have interviewed 23 people so far. Teachers, store owners, students, parents. All of them have experienced what you experienced. Some worse. He pulled out pages of typed interviews, photographs, statistics. The work was thorough and professional, far beyond what Marcus would expect from a high school student. This is impressive, Jimin. Really impressive. What are you planning to do with it? I want to publish it. Maybe as a website, maybe as a booklet to distribute in the community. I want people to understand that what happened to you was not isolated. It is a pattern. And I want the people who experienced it to know that their stories matter. Marcus looked through the interviews. Each one was heartbreaking. A teacher pulled over 7 times in 1 year. A store owner accused of shoplifting in his own store. A mother searched in front of her children for no reason. Story after story of dignity stripped away, of justice denied, of people treated as suspects rather than citizens. These stories need to be told, Marcus said. But Jimin, you need to be careful. Some people will not like this. Some people will push back hard. I know, sir. My parents are worried too. But I keep thinking about what you said to me that day. That standing up for what is right is never easy, but it is always worth it. Jimin looked up, his young face set with determination. I have to do this. These people trusted me with their stories. I cannot let them down. Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. This young man had witnessed injustice and decided to do something about it. He was not waiting for adults to fix the problem. He was taking action himself. How can I help? Marcus asked. Would you write a foreword? For the collection? Your name would give it credibility. It would help people pay attention. Marcus agreed without hesitation. Over the next week, he worked on the foreword, carefully crafting words that would honor the stories Jimin had collected, while also calling for action and change. "These stories are not comfortable to read," he wrote. "They challenge our assumptions about justice and equality. They force us to confront the gap between the America we claim to be and the America that actually exists for many of our citizens. But discomfort is necessary for growth. Change begins when we stop looking away from injustice and start facing it directly." When Jimin's project launched online, it got immediate attention. Local news covered it. National outlets picked it up. The stories went viral, each one adding to a larger picture of systemic discrimination. Some people accused Jimin of exaggerating or making things up. Others said he was too young to understand the complexities of law enforcement. But many more people thanked him for giving voice to experiences that were often dismissed or ignored. Marcus watched Jimin handle the attention with grace and maturity beyond his years. The young man appeared on local television, spoke at community meetings, and stood firm in the face of criticism.
He had found his voice and he was using it powerfully. One night,
As Marcus sat with Jennifer watching Jimin being interviewed on the news, Jennifer squeezed his hand. "You did that," she said softly. "Did what?" "You inspired that young man. You showed him that one person can make a difference. Look at what he is doing now. Look at the change he is creating." Marcus watched Jimin speak confidently on the screen, talking about justice and dignity and the power of storytelling. Jennifer was right. His decision to speak out had created ripples. Jimin's project had created more ripples. Officer Martinez's efforts to reform training had created ripples. Each action led to more actions, each voice encouraged more voices. Change was happening. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. "I keep thinking about something Mr. Wilson said," Marcus told Jennifer. "He said the fight is long. That sometimes it feels like we are going backward, but we keep fighting because giving up is not an option. He is right, and you are not alone in this fight. You have an army of people standing with you." Literally and figuratively, Marcus smiled at that. His soldiers at Fort Benning had been incredibly supportive. Many had reached out to share their own experiences with discrimination. Some had attended community meetings with him. Others had started conversations in their own communities about bias and justice. The ripple effect continued. A neighboring police department reached out to Chief Davis asking for advice on implementing similar reforms. A state legislator introduced a bill requiring annual bias training for all officers. A national civil rights organization launched a campaign using Marcus's story as a central example of why change was needed. Marcus had not wanted to become a symbol. He had not wanted his worst moment to become a public lesson. But he was learning that sometimes our pain could have purpose. Sometimes our struggles could spark movements. Sometimes one person's courage could inspire thousands. The challenge coin he had given to Jimin had become something of a symbol itself. Jimin wore it on a chain around his neck, and other young activists in the community had adopted similar coins as a sign of their commitment to justice. They called themselves the Challengers, a group dedicated to challenging injustice wherever they found it. Marcus met with the Challengers one Saturday afternoon. About 20 high school and college students gathered in a community center, all of them passionate about change. They asked him questions, sought his advice, shared their own ideas for projects and activism. "Remember that change requires patience and persistence," Marcus told them. "You will face setbacks. You will encounter people who do not want things to change. You will get tired and frustrated and wonder if it is worth it. But keep going. Every small victory matters. Every conversation you change matters. Every mind you open matters." A young woman raised her hand. "Sir, do you ever regret speaking out? Do you wish you had just handled it privately?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss my privacy. Sometimes I wish I could just be a soldier doing my job instead of a symbol of something bigger. But no, I do not regret it, because staying silent would mean accepting that what happened to me was okay. And it is not okay. It will never be okay." Another student asked, "What keeps you going when things get hard?" Marcus thought about all the messages he had received, all the people who had shared their stories, all the young people like Jimin who were inspired to act. "You do," he said simply. "Young people like you who refuse to accept injustice as normal. You are the reason I keep going. Because if you are brave enough to stand up, how can I sit down?" The room erupted in applause. These young people, barely old enough to vote, were taking on the weight of history and trying to bend it toward justice. They were the hope that Mr. Wilson had talked about, the evidence that progress was possible. As Marcus drove home that evening, he thought about everything that had happened since that traffic stop 6 weeks ago. So much had changed. Sullivan was facing consequences. Martinez was working to make amends. Jimin had become an activist. The challengers were organizing. Police departments were reforming policies. Conversations were happening in living rooms and classrooms across the country. One traffic stop had sparked all of this. One man's decision to call for help. One general's decision to respond. One teenager's decision to press record. One elderly woman's decision to stand witness. Individual actions, multiplied by courage, created movements. Marcus pulled into his driveway and sat in his car for a moment, the same car he had been driving that day. He looked at the steering wheel where his hands had gripped so tightly during that terrifying hour. He thought about how close he had come to a very different outcome, but he had survived. And from that survival, something larger was growing. Not justice, not yet, but the seeds of justice, the possibility of justice. The demand for justice, it was a start. And sometimes a start was all you needed to believe that change was possible. Marcus got out of his car and walked into his house, where his family was waiting. Jennifer had made his favorite dinner. The kids were laughing about something that happened at school. Life continued normal and beautiful and precious. He had fought for this country on foreign battlefields. Now he was fighting for this country in community centers and police academies and news interviews. Both fights mattered. Both required courage, and both were worth every sacrifice. 1 year had passed since that October afternoon on Oak Street. Marcus stood in the same spot where he had been detained, but everything felt different now. The street looked the same with its large trees and well-kept homes. But the meaning of this place had changed. It was no longer just a neighborhood street. It had become a symbol. Today was a community gathering organized by Jimin Park and the Challengers. They had invited Marcus, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Wilson, Chief Davis, and others to commemorate the anniversary and celebrate the changes that had occurred. A small crowd of about 100 people gathered on the sidewalk and surrounding lawns. Jimin stood on a small platform they had set up, speaking into a microphone. He was 18 now, about to start college with a full scholarship to study journalism and civil rights. The nervous teenager from a year ago had transformed into a confident young leader. 1 year ago, something happened on this street that changed our community, Jimin said. Colonel Marcus Thompson was pulled over for no good reason and treated like a criminal because of the color of his skin. It was wrong. It was unjust. And it could have ended in tragedy. The crowd was silent, listening, but it did not end in tragedy. It ended in accountability. It ended in change. It ended in a movement that is still growing today. Jimin gestured to the people gathered. We are here today not just to remember what happened, but to celebrate what we have accomplished together and to commit ourselves to continuing this work. Marcus listened from the crowd, standing with Jennifer and his children. Maya was home from college for the weekend. David stood tall beside his father, no longer a scared boy but a young man finding his own voice. Jimin continued, "Let me tell you what has changed in 1 year. Officer Derek Sullivan was convicted of civil rights violations. He will never wear a badge again. His victims received justice. That matters." Applause broke out. Marcus did not join in. He had no joy in Sullivan's punishment, only sadness that it had taken so long, that so many people had been harmed before anyone listened. Chief Davis implemented major reforms in our police department. Jimin went on. Body cameras are mandatory. There is a civilian review board. Officers are trained on bias and intervention. Other departments across the state have adopted these same changes. That matters. More applause. Chief Davis stood near the back, nodding. He had fought hard for those reforms, facing resistance from the police union and some of his own officers. But he had pushed through because it was right. The Challengers, the youth organization that started right here, now has chapters in 15 cities, Jimin said with pride. We have documented over 300 stories of racial profiling. We have organized community meetings. We have pushed for policy changes. We have refused to stay silent. That matters. The loudest applause yet. Many of the challengers were in the crowd. Young people wearing shirts with the group's logo. a challenge coin with the words "Courage Matters" underneath. But most importantly, conversations are happening. People who never thought about racial profiling are thinking about it now. People who never understood what it felt like to be targeted are beginning to understand. People who stayed silent before are finding their voices. That matters most of all. Jimin paused, looking out at the crowd. I want to invite some special people to speak. First, Mrs. Helen Patterson, whose courage to record and bear witness made all of this possible. Mrs. Patterson walked to the platform, moving slowly but steadily. She was 74 now, her silver hair bright in the autumn sunlight. When she reached the microphone, she took a moment to compose herself. I did what anyone should do when they see injustice, she said simply. I watched. I recorded. I refused to look away. My husband taught me that. He was a black man who served this country and was treated with disrespect more times than I can count. He could not be here to stand up for Colonel Thompson, but I could, and I would do it again tomorrow. She looked directly at Marcus. Colonel Thompson, you showed such dignity that day, such strength. You did not deserve what happened to you, but how you handled it, with grace and courage, that inspired all of us. Thank you for not giving up on this country even when this country failed you. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. He nodded at Mrs. Patterson, unable to speak. Next came Mr. Harold Wilson, the elderly Korean War veteran. He moved slowly, using a cane, but his voice was still strong when he spoke. I am 88 years old now, he said. I have fought in a war. I have marched for civil rights. I have seen this country at its best and its worst. What I saw 1 year ago was America at its worst. But what I have seen since then gives me hope. He paused, gathering breath. Change is possible. Justice is possible. But only if good people stand up. Only if we refuse to accept cruelty as normal. Only if we remember that we are all human beings deserving of dignity and respect. He looked around at the young people in the crowd. You young folks, you are the future. Keep fighting. Keep pushing. Keep demanding better. Do not let old men like me down. We started this fight, but you have to finish it. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Mr. Wilson waved them off, embarrassed by the attention, but Marcus saw the satisfaction in his eyes. The old soldier was passing the torch to a new generation. Chief Davis spoke next. He acknowledged the failures of his department, the ways they had ignored complaints, the culture that allowed officers like Sullivan to operate for years. I cannot undo the harm that was done, Davis said honestly. I cannot give back the dignity that was stolen. But I can promise you this, we are doing better. We are holding our officers accountable. We are training them to see people, not threats. We are building trust with the community. It is not perfect. We still have a long way to go. But we are trying and we will not stop trying. He turned to Marcus. Colonel Thompson, you could have sued us. You could have made this a bitter legal fight. Instead, you worked with us. You spoke to our recruits. You helped us understand what we were doing wrong. That took incredible grace. Thank you. Finally, Jimin called Marcus to the platform. Marcus had not planned to speak. He had thought this day should be about the community, about the young people carrying the work forward. But as he stood before the microphone, looking at all these faces, he knew he had something to say. 1 year ago, I was scared. Marcus began. I stood on this street for over an hour, terrified that I might not see my family again, terrified that one wrong move would end my life. And I was angry. Angry that I had served my country for 24 years but was treated like a criminal. Angry that my rank, my service, my dignity meant nothing to an officer who saw only the color of my skin. The crowd was completely silent. I am still angry sometimes. Because what happened to me still happens to other people every day. Because one conviction and one set of reforms does not solve a problem that has existed for centuries. Because my children still have to be taught how to survive a traffic stop instead of just how to drive safely. Marcus's voice grew stronger. But I am also hopeful, and that hope comes from people like Jimin, who saw injustice and decided to do something about it. From people like Mrs. Patterson, who refused to look away. From people like Mr. Wilson, who kept fighting even when they were tired. From young people like the challengers who refuse to accept the world as it is and insist on making it better. He looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as he could. Change is hard. Change is slow. Change requires courage from all of us, not just some of us. It requires white people to use their privilege to speak up. It requires police officers to hold their colleagues accountable. It requires community members to stay engaged even when it is uncomfortable. It requires young people to keep pushing even when progress seems impossible. Marcus paused, thinking carefully about his next words. I am a soldier. I have fought in wars. And I can tell you that the hardest battles are not always the ones with guns and explosions. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight in our communities, in our institutions, in our own hearts. The battle to overcome prejudice. The battle to see each other as human beings first. The battle to create a country that lives up to its promises. He looked at Jimin. Young people like you are fighting that battle every day. You are winning small victories. You are changing minds. You are refusing to accept injustice as normal. That takes courage, real courage. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was a challenge coin, identical to the one he had given Jimin a year ago. He held it up for everyone to see. In the military, we give challenge coins to recognize exceptional service or courage. 1 year ago, I gave Jimin one of these coins. I told him he earned it by standing up and recording what he saw. Today, I want to give coins to others who have shown that same courage. He called Mrs. Patterson forward and presented her with a coin. Then Mr. Wilson. Then Officer Jennifer Martinez, who had come to the gathering despite knowing she might face anger from the community. She had continued her work training officers, had spoken at numerous events about the importance of intervention, had become a voice for reform within the police department. When Marcus gave her the coin, some people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Martinez had been complicit in his detention, after all. She had stood by while Sullivan harassed him. But Marcus had thought carefully about this decision. Officer Martinez made mistakes, Marcus said clearly. She stayed silent when she should have spoken up. But since that day, she has worked hard to make things right. She has admitted her failures. She has changed her behavior. She has helped reform the system. That takes courage too. The courage to admit we were wrong and do better. Martinez accepted the coin with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Colonel, she whispered. I will spend the rest of my career trying to deserve this. Marcus gave coins to several members of the challengers, young people who had spent the past year organizing, documenting, advocating. He gave one to a local journalist who had covered the story thoroughly and fairly. He gave one to a city council member who had pushed for police reform legislation. When he finished, he addressed the crowd one final time. These coins represent courage, but courage is not just for special occasions. Courage is needed every day. When you see something wrong, speak up. When you witness injustice, document it. When you have privilege, use it to help others. When you have power, use it to create change. That is how we honor what happened here, not by remembering one day, but by acting every day. The gathering concluded with people sharing food and conversation. Marcus moved through the crowd, shaking hands, listening to stories, thanking people for their support. He met people who had been targeted by Sullivan and found justice. He met young activists planning their next projects. He met police officers who were committed to doing better. Jennifer found him talking with a group of teenagers about college and career plans. She slipped her hand into his and he squeezed it gratefully. Maya and David were nearby, deep in conversation with Jimin about activism and social change. You did good today, Jennifer said softly. I just told the truth. That is what makes it good. As the sun began to set, Marcus walked back to the exact spot where he had stood 1 year ago. He placed his hands on an invisible car, remembering the fear, the anger, the helplessness. But he also remembered the strength he had found, the dignity he had maintained, the hope that had emerged. Jimin approached and stood beside him. What are you thinking, sir? Marcus smiled. I am thinking about how much has changed, and how much still needs to change. Do you think we will get there? To real justice? I do not know if we will get there in my lifetime. Maybe not in yours either, but we are moving in the right direction, and every step matters. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jimin pulled out his phone. Sir, I want to show you something. He opened a website. It was a national database of police misconduct that had been created in response to stories like Marcus's. Thousands of reports, all searchable, all public. This did not exist a year ago. Now it does, because of what happened here. Marcus looked at the screen, then at Jimin. You built this? Not just me. The challengers worked with some tech companies and civil rights organizations. We wanted to make sure that when officers like Sullivan move to new departments, their history follows them. No more burying complaints. No more letting bad officers start fresh in new cities. Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. This young man had taken his pain and transformed it into action, into systems, into real change. Jimin, you are going to do great things. You already are doing great things. I learned from the best, sir. You showed me what courage looks like. As the gathering wound down and people began to leave, Marcus took one last look at Oak Street. This place would always carry the memory of his worst moment, but it now also carried the memory of what came after. Solidarity, activism, change, hope. He got into his car, the same car from that day. Jennifer sat beside him. Their children climbed into the back seat. They drove away from Oak Street, heading home. Marcus glanced in his rearview mirror and saw Jimin standing with other challengers, all of them wearing their coins around their necks, all of them ready to continue the fight. The next morning, Marcus returned to Fort Benning and his regular duties. Life had to continue. He still had soldiers to lead, missions to plan, responsibilities to fulfill. But he was changed by the past year. He saw things differently now. He understood his purpose more clearly. During a meeting with his battalion, one of the younger soldiers approached him privately. The soldier was black, barely 22 years old, fresh out of training. "Sir, I wanted to thank you," the young soldier said. "My brother was pulled over last month. The officer was aggressive, making accusations. My brother remembered your story. He stayed calm. He recorded the interaction, and when things got bad, he asked for a supervisor. It probably saved his life." Marcus felt the weight of that statement. His story had reached someone he never met, helped them survive a situation he understood too well. "I am glad your brother is safe," Marcus said. "That is what this is all about. Helping people survive, helping people know their rights, helping people maintain their dignity. Because of you, sir, we know it is possible. We know we can stand up." These moments happen more frequently now. Soldiers thanked him. Strangers recognized him in stores and restaurants. People shared how his story had impacted their lives. It was overwhelming sometimes, but it was also meaningful. His pain had purpose. In the evenings, Marcus continued his advocacy work. He spoke at more police academies, more community meetings, more universities. He testified before the state legislature about the need for stronger accountability measures. He worked with civil rights organizations on policy proposals. The work was exhausting but necessary, and he was not alone. Jennifer often accompanied him, adding her perspective as an educator and mother. Maya became involved with student activism at Howard University. David started a chapter of the Challengers at his high school. The Thompson family had become a family of advocates, each fighting in their own way. One evening, Marcus received a video call from Jimin. The young man was in his college dorm room, surrounded by books and papers. "Sir, I have news," Jimin said excitedly. "The Challengers just won a grant from a major foundation, $100,000 to expand our work. We are going to hire staff, create more chapters, build better technology for documenting police misconduct." "This is huge." Marcus felt genuine joy. "Jimin, that is incredible. You have built something real and lasting." "We built it, sir. Your story was the foundation. Everything else grew from that." After the call ended, Marcus sat quietly in his home office. He looked at the challenge coin on his desk, identical to the ones he had given away. He thought about Officer Sullivan, now working some minimum wage job, his career destroyed by his own prejudice. He thought about Officer Martinez working hard to earn redemption. He thought about Chief Davis fighting to transform his department. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Wilson, and all the ordinary people who had shown extraordinary courage. Most of all, he thought about Jimin and the Challengers, young people refusing to accept the world as it was and insisting it could be better. Jennifer entered the office and found him deep in thought. "What is on your mind?" "I was just thinking about how one moment can change everything. One traffic stop changed my life. But it also changed so many other lives, started so many ripples. Do you regret it? Any of it?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I regret that it happened. I regret that Sullivan was allowed to operate for so long. I regret that it took my rank and resources to get justice. But I do not regret speaking out. I do not regret using my platform, because something good came from something terrible. That matters." Jennifer sat beside him and took his hand. "You know what I am proudest of? Not that you survived it, though I am grateful every day that you did. I am proud that you refused to let it define you. You took the worst moment of your life and used it to help others. That is real strength. Marcus squeezed her hand. I could not have done it without you. Without the kids. Without knowing I had family supporting me. They sat together in comfortable silence, partners in life and in the fight for justice. The next weekend, Marcus drove back to visit his mother. He took the same route through the same neighborhood. When he reached the corner of Oak and Maple, he paused. A small memorial had been placed there by the community. Not for him, but for everyone who had experienced what he experienced. Flowers, photos, handwritten messages. One message caught his eye. This is where one man's courage sparked a movement. May we never forget. May we never stop fighting. Marcus read those words and felt the weight of expectation and the lightness of hope mixing together. The fight was not over. It would not be over for a long time. But it was being fought. By him, by Jimin, by the challengers, by Mrs. Patterson, by reformed officers like Martinez, by young people who refused to accept injustice. Change was happening. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. Marcus continued driving to his mother's house. She greeted him at the door with a hug, just like always. They sat in her kitchen drinking tea, talking about family and life. Normal moments, precious moments. As he prepared to leave, his mother took his hand. Marcus, I want you to know something. I am proud of you. Not because of your rank or your medals. I am proud because when you faced injustice, you did not let it break you. You stood tall. You spoke up. You made a difference. I am just doing what you taught me, Mom. Stand up for what is right. Treat people with respect. Never give up. She smiled, her eyes wet with tears. Then I did my job as a mother. As Marcus drove away from his mother's house, he thought about legacy. What would he leave behind? What would people remember? He hoped they would remember not just that he survived a traffic stop, but what he did with that survival. He hoped they would remember the young people he inspired. He hoped they would remember the changes that were made, the policies that were implemented, the conversations that were started. Most of all, he hoped they would remember that change was possible. That courage mattered, that one person speaking up could inspire thousands. That justice, though slow and imperfect, was worth fighting for. The sun was setting as Marcus drove home, painting the sky in beautiful colors. He thought about the past year, about everything that had happened, about how much had changed. He thought about the year ahead, the work still to do, the fight still to fight. He was tired. This work was exhausting, but he was also energized, because the alternative to fighting was accepting, and he could not accept a world where people were targeted because of their skin color. So he would keep fighting. Keep speaking, keep pushing for change, because that is what soldiers do. They fight. Not just on battlefields overseas, but in communities at home. They fight for the ideals they swore to protect. Liberty, justice, equality for all. Marcus pulled into his driveway and sat in his car for a moment, just like he had done a year ago. But this time there was no fear in his chest. There was determination. There was hope. There was purpose. He got out of his car and walked into his house where his family was waiting. Tomorrow he would continue the fight. But tonight, he would rest in the company of people he loved, grateful for one more day, one more chance, one more opportunity to make a difference. The fight for justice was long, but Marcus Thompson was ready for the long fight. And he was not alone. Millions of people were fighting alongside him, each in their own way, each adding their voice to the chorus demanding change. Together, they would keep pushing. Together, they would keep hoping. Together, they would keep believing that a better world was possible, and one day maybe justice would not be something people had to fight for. It would just be something everyone received regardless of the color of their skin, the neighborhood they lived in, or the car they drove. That day had not arrived yet. But it was coming, and every voice raised, every action taken, every moment of courage brought it a little bit closer. Marcus Thompson would keep fighting until that day came, and even if it did not come in his lifetime, he would fight anyway. Because some fights are worth fighting regardless of whether you see the victory. This was one of those fights, and Marcus was ready.